What do you believe right now that's making you feel this way? And when you analyse it, you realise how irrational you can be at times.
Every single one of our major customers and minor customers all shut their doors overnight.
It's not sales per se, but the outcome of it is because people get to know you, they get to see you.
But, what's the culture like at the business? What do we stand for, the values?
I've got to tick that box on my personal development programme I don't really want to be here.
Scaling up a business isn't easy. If it were, we wouldn't have less than 4% of businesses scaling beyond 10 employees or around £1 million turnover level, and less than 1% beyond 50 employees. But the contribution that we make as owner-managers to our economies is immense and should never be underestimated, yet it can be a tough gig for all of us at times, and only other business owners truly understand the challenges that we face. And through ScaleUp Radio, we aim to help make things a little easier. We interview guests who have been where you are now and may have faced some of the challenges that you are facing. And they offer their thoughts and advice on what has worked for them, as well as what didn't. And we've also combined many of the lessons from these interviews and also through working with hundreds of owner managers over the last 10 years or so into a practical scale-up handbook that we've called the Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System, or ESUS. And it's for owner managers like you and me as we navigate our own scale-up journey. And you can order a copy through your favourite online book retailer or by going to all the W's, esusgroup.co.uk, www.esusgroup.co.uk.
Hello, I'm Granger Forson, www.bizsmart-gloucestershire.co.uk, or find me on LinkedIn. This time on ScaleUp Radio, I speak with Benjamin Janes, the founder of the Trust Partnership. The Trust Partnership is a business that manages charitable trusts, foundations and almshouses charities with its unique shared resources, helping them to be more efficient and effective. Some of these almshouse charities go back to the 9th and 10th century. The Trust Partnership is not that old. It was started in 2005, but it does have a very long viewpoint for its future. In his story about his business, Benjamin talks about the change point early on that allowed him to reflect on how to build a business based on his values. This has allowed him to develop the business to serve his clients they have today. As always, we cover a lot of ground, including a business that lives up to its values brings joy every day to all in it and all those it serves. While we all have short-term issues, it's thinking about the really long-term that allows you to make key strategic decisions. And trust is key in everything you do. What is so illuminating about this conversation with Benjamin is that the key to values is the behaviours that you demonstrate every day. Their defined values don't make you soft, he says, but allows his team to demand excellence and provide the best from themselves to their clients. I know you'll get something out of this episode, so let's go over and hear from Benjamin. So, hello, Benjamin Janes, and welcome to ScaleUp Radio. Please introduce yourself and your business.
Yes, of course. Thanks for having me. My name is Benjamin Janes. I'm Chief Executive of a business called the Trust Partnership. So we're a specialist outsourcer managing grant-making foundations and almshouses on behalf of charity clients. It's a very niche enterprise of a scale. We're probably a little over $1 million in turnover across about 50 clients with a little under 50 staff.
So take us through then in terms of what you do. You talked about almshouses, you talked about trusts. Okay, give some description in terms of how you help your clients, what your clients are, and what you do for them.
So in terms of charitable trusts, they're a particular kind of charity which we find in the UK especially, but also all over the world. The kind of trusts that we deal with are endowed foundations. So they're not fundraising charities. They have their own capital, which has been gifted to them either by a founder or by a business. And those funds are typically going on in perpetuity. and they're kicking out an income which the trustees need to give away as donations to either individuals in distress or more commonly to other charities in specific fields. And so the kind of work that we do ranges from being clerk or secretary to the trustees of that entity, and then providing grant making expertise, grant management, administration, and then all of the financial management that sits behind it. So bookkeeping, management accounting, annual accounting. And then on the Almshouse side, again, very niche area. This is a kind of a very ancient form of social housing. So in days gone by, an individual would have gifted funds or property to create some social housing, and it's wrapped in a charity wrapper, basically. And that housing is provided for individuals in need, sometimes against a particular class. So the class would be, for example, the poor and distressed women of a particular parish, or the widows of miners in Durham, as another example. And we provide similar services for those kinds of organisations, as well as all of the property management and resident welfare support that they need.
Well, that's fascinating. It's amazing how you come across some very interesting client bases as I do these podcasts and explore things. So almshouses is that a long-standing thing? You know, how far back do almshouses go in terms of sort of trusts being set up around them?
When I say ancient, I think the earliest are sort of 9th century, and then sort of 10th, 11th, 12th century became more popular. And then there was another flush then in the sort of Victorian era of people creating almshouses. But you can imagine that some of the buildings that we're therefore looking after are very beautiful indeed, but take quite a lot of upkeep, lots of grade 1, grade 2 listed buildings. And they're not always fit for purpose in terms of the provision of ideal housing accommodation for people in need. So there are some complexities there. I'm very, very fortunate that we've got an expert team as part of our organisation who are very experienced at dealing with some of those issues. But it is a really interesting field to work in. I think we all, as a team, we all feel very privileged.
Wow, that's blown me away. You know, 9th century, 11th, 12th. Wow, that's some of those buildings must be really old. Are there new ones come online? You know, are people still setting up trusts around almhousing today? Does that still happen?
Yeah, it is, but less commonly so. I think, we're in conversation with a number of organisations, including the Church of England, who are looking for opportunities to create almshouses. Obviously, there are other forms of social housing out there now, and almshouses, the almshouse model, if you like, doesn't necessarily suit all circumstances. Most of the new builds that we're involved in are typically where a building is it really isn't fit for purpose, so it's had to be removed and rebuilt. That wouldn't happen to one of the ancient ones, but might happen to one of the say a building from the 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
Or people utilising space around their almshouse to put up new units, new blocks.
Okay, so your business helps these charitable trusts and almhousing trusts, I suppose, in terms of that structure. So how did that come about? I presume they always used to run it themselves, did they?
Yeah, typically they would have in the past. Well, many of them still do. They would have a sort of small team of full or part-time people who would be managing, depending on the kind of entity, the kind of activity that they were engaged in. So for a foundation, you might have 1 or 2 full-time members of staff, or maybe only a part-time member of staff, depending on the scale of the foundation. And almshouses would have, cleaners, and they'd be directly employing a clerk or secretary or a warden who might be resident. So, but the model had come, in both cases, the model has come down over the generations and has, while some excellent parts to it, I think we felt that there were opportunities to offer a different kind of service, which would provide slightly different benefits and fewer downsides, if you like. So I'm a very poorly educated individual and dropped out of university, but very quickly went to work in the charity sector as a fundraiser and worked for a number of different organizations as a volunteer fundraiser, and then as a paid fundraiser, and then as head of fundraising. And in that process, I got to see the operation of both almshouses and charitable trusts, and was interested in working in those fields. Routes into those fields were difficult to find, but I had seen some family trusts operating in a sort of shared services office. They were sharing staff and sharing resources, sharing expertise, and but they were trusts which were particularly related to each other. They were set up by different family members or similar. And so I was thinking about that for about 10 years, and how I might create something in that kind of vein. And then in 2005, I set up the trust partnership, basically to provide that shared resource, that shared infrastructure and shared expertise with unrelated, independent grant-making foundations. That seemed to be the simplest place to start. And although the first few years were reasonably difficult in terms of, well, it's hard to start a business, isn't it? And I had a lot to learn about that. But we now have, as I said, 45 independent grant-making foundations with endowments collectively of about $1 billion. We're giving away hundreds of millions of pounds on their behalf. We've got a really expert team. We've got fantastic systems. We've worked out the right technology. So being in that environment, learning from our clients, getting better at what we do every year, finding and recruiting staff that stick with us, finding new clients that stick with us, has been a real joy. And that's how the business has developed. And then, as you often find, that within a geographical area, a trust or foundation will have common trustees with local almshouses, because it's the similar kinds of people that are providing their skills and expertise as trustees. And so up in Hackney in East London, we had a number of clients, and we were asked to look at the management of an almshouse about 6 or 7 years ago. And we had a lot to learn there as well. Initially, we were just providing the secretariat services and the and accounting and so on. The building management and resident welfare were the two kind of outlier functions that we were uncertain about. But we managed to slowly learn those skills, and now if we're not actually the largest manager of almshouses in the country, then we're certainly close to being so.
Right. So you had the idea, 10 years before 2005, and you started then back in 2005. You've developed a skill set through learn by doing over time as you've worked with these different organisations that have come on board with you. What do you strive to be best at? What makes you sort of different? Are there other similar types of organisations like the Trust Partnership helping other organisations similar to your clients?
There's nobody quite like us, Granger. There are two questions there, really, aren't there? What's the competition? Well, each of these entities that work with us, they could manage themselves by directly employing part-timers or full-time employees or consultants or accountants or whatever, and so there's a very easy exit if they wanted it. And there are, of course, housing associations which also manage almshouses, and some of them do that very well. And there are firms of solicitors and accountants and any number of consultants who will manage a grant-making foundation.
Yeah.
So I think, so if the question is what is it that we are really good at, I think it comes down to the vision of the organization to be a partner in perpetuity with the clients that we have. So our clients have a very, very long-term view. They've obviously got short-term immediate needs to welfare of residents or they're worrying about their financial resources, their investments, they're worried about getting grants out of the door, and they're worried about the regulations which are changing all the time around them from the Charity Commission and Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. So they've got immediate needs, but they've also got this very, very long-term view that they're continuing in perpetuity. And so we've created an organization which has that really long-term view.
Mm.
And we also understand the nature of the nature and attitude of the trustees that we're working with, because we're so committed to the sector that they feel, I think, that we have a sort of similar DNA to them. Even though we're a for-profit enterprise, we're a social enterprise. We're a B corporation. Many of our staff have come through the charity sector in one way or another, and through our training processes internally, everyone that clients meet are expert in their particular field. I think that's really important for clients to understand. But also, there's a culture in the organization which is vibrant and diligent, but it's also founded on some values which may sound uncommercial, but they're certainly unusual. And those would be patience, kindness, not keeping record of wrong, faithfulness, hope, and trust. And so we're managing our business and our relationships with our clients and our relationships with their clients, who would be their grant recipients or their residents, with that always in mind. Those values always in mind, and those higher ideals, if you like, come across in our behaviors, how we address the work in hand, and our attitude in terms of the way that we deal with people. And I think those are the things that which is making the business successful. I think it's what makes our clients want to stick with us for a huge length of time. And I think that's the same with our employees, who typically, well, I rather crassly say sometimes when we're hiring people, I want you to work for me forever. And that's because I want people to come and join us and then learn how to work in our particular sector, and to then flourish in the environment which we're trying to create or have created, and then to develop their career with us without having to go somewhere else or do something else. Doesn't always work, Granger, I have to say.
Okay.
And some people come and they learn amazing skills, and then they go and work directly for maybe a very big almshouse or something like that. Okay. And I'm very happy to celebrate that. But some do stay, and and may well stay for the whole of their working life, or the rest of their working life rather. And that's a really exciting thing.
Yeah, and I can really sort of feel through the way that you use your values to define your company in terms of what you're trying to achieve, and how that would then link to inspiring people to stay for a long time. Kindness, hope, trust, passionate, and some amazing sets of values that would help that work. How let's talk a bit more about then finding the right people to fit the organization. How do you do that? How do you find the right fit for people, those people where you could say to them, we'd like you to work here forever? I mean, what a fantastic statement to make when somebody is looking to employ them. So how do you go about finding people?
Well, there are obviously specialist roles that we need to advertise for, or very occasionally we'll go to an agency. Lots of people, when they're joining us in more junior roles, they're actually coming by recommendation. So they're friends of employees or relations of employees, and they're being drawn in that way, and which is a bit dangerous, really. Well, dangerous only in as much as you can advertise and not be getting anybody suitable, and you feel like you're very, because you're recruiting on the basis of new clients that you've won, and you need somebody there to do the work, and sometimes we're a bit shorthanded. But usually, eventually, the right person comes through the door by one of those means, and I think our attitude is to, even in those areas where it might be a specialist skill, like a management accountant or something like that, they won't have necessarily. It would be very unusual to find a management accountant that had really specialized in the kind of clients that we have. They might be a sort of general commercial management accountant and be used to working in a company, and often may not have had a very nice time working in a company. And so they may be attracted to us because of our values, but they also need to learn about, how to produce accounts for an endowed foundation, how to analyze investment reports of the endowment from the investment manager, how to reconcile the residents' weekly maintenance contribution. They need to be able to do everything, because we're not a big team, so we can't have people that. It's difficult if we've got people who are just one-trick ponies.
Yeah.
So we need a broad base of skills in these specialist areas. So we're quite choosy, and but we're definitely hiring for character. I think we're definitely hiring for character, and then training for the skills.
Yeah.
Even if we're hiring into a specialist post. And then really it's about spending time with them, allowing them to settle into this rather strange organization, and begin to believe from their colleagues around them about what we're trying to do. And that that takes time, for people to get their feet under the desk, learn a new industry, sometimes learn lots of new skills, and some of those values that I'm espousing may suggest that we're a little bit soft, and so that can be confusing for people, because I don't think we're soft at all. I think we're really, really demanding, and of our employees, such as our commitment to the sector and to our clients, that we're hoping to inculcate our employees with this idea that it's our absolute commitment and mission to serve them to the very, very best of our ability. And if we are doing that as a team, there really isn't any room for passengers. And also because we're an outsourcer, unless we're all giving our very best all the time, then we're kind of letting them down. And that it seems almost morally wrong, doesn't it, to be taking money off a charity when you're not giving your very, very best. So that's part of our thinking. But also our clients themselves are demanding. We're not the inexpensive option for them. Let's say that. We're probably costing them a little bit more than it would cost them to directly employ somebody to do the work that we're doing. So we have to be providing benefits over and above that. And there are some in the model, like business continuity. If you're a charity and you're directly employing somebody, and they go long-term sick, or they retire on you, given the age profile of most of the people that are working directly for these organizations, then you've got a real concern about loss of institutional memory when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, if you're working with the trust partnership, you don't have any of that fear, because you've got endless continuity with our team. And I mean, even short-term sickness cover for a direct employee of a foundation is a problem, because everything grinds to a halt if you've only got 1.5 people or whatever.
Yes.
But obviously we don't, if you're working with the trust partnership, that isn't an issue. And those problems, if you can imagine those problems for a grant-making foundation, they're even more acute for an Almshouse, because you've got vulnerable residents living on site that need to be supported. Not like a social care. It's not a social care context. It's independent living, but they're there because of certain, issues of age or health or vulnerability. And so the regime of care, and the quality of care needs to continue, every day the same, really. And so short-term sickness is a problem. Long-term sickness is a real problem. And then there's the institutional memory piece, that if people depart. And I think the other piece in that area, which sort of slightly flows on from that, is the pressure on trustees. You'll know, Granger, talking to lots of businesses, that bad news travels fast and uphill. It goes, responsibility goes uphill, doesn't it, further towards the leadership. And if you're a small business owner like myself, then stuff ends up on my desk which other people might consider to be minutiae, because of. And so if you're in a charitable trust or foundation, or you're a trustee of an Almshouse, if your employees go sick, then the responsibility comes back to you, and you're a volunteer. So that's a challenge for them. That's a challenge.
Yes. I just want to go back a little bit in terms of the conversation. You used a term that I've never really come across before, and it is fascinating, and it probably links very much to your values. And then my next question: you use this term, helping your people to settle in. I thought it was a fantastic phrase in terms of that. And you talk about the values are not soft. And I totally agree with that. Values are really important in a business, but they're not there to be woolly. They're actually there to help the business achieve what it does. So I'm just interested, as your business has grown since 2005, how have you sort of maintained and ensured that the values and the have remained an integral part of the business? Because you're definitely showing that it is. I'm fascinated to see how you've done that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really pertinent question, Granger, because it's a challenge that we face as we expand. And also we've taken on contracts recently where we've two-peat staff in who were, I did not find these people, and they are now my employees. So that's another source of employees.
Yes.
With a slightly different recruitment process. But I think the answer is that so far we have maintained those values by finding the right employees and people understanding that it's behavior. That's how we're living out those values. We're not just saluting the flag on a Friday morning. We're living out those values on a day-to-day basis. And behavior that doesn't fit that model gets challenged. So people being rude to each other or rude to an inquirer, a grantee or a resident, or heaven forbid, rude to a client, or acting in a manner which is not trustworthy, or and there's the faithfulness and not keeping record of wrong are really important, I think, because clients and colleagues and suppliers and the whole community can be difficult to deal with sometimes, but remaining faithful to them in those circumstances is a really important part of us and our behavior. So we're in conversation, for example, with a colleague who says, "Oh, I've had a really difficult meeting, and so and so was being very, challenging and a little bit aggressive, or talking, maybe even talking about a client." Then we have to think about what's our response to that through the lens of those values. And coming back to that, not keeping record of wrong, that isn't a blind, we don't keep any records of mistakes or slip-ups or whatever. It's important to know and understand that we can make mistakes and other people can make mistakes. So when I go and abase myself in front of a client because of a mistake that we have made, I'm doing that in the hope that they will forgive me. Again, all of these are the values that we're espousing.
Yeah.
And because I'm doing that genuinely, they do tend to. And when you've got a difficult client, by being faithful to them and letting go some of the behavioral things that they've got, but faithfully and hopefully and diligently working on their behalf, it's amazing the number of people that we manage to earn to become our biggest fans, our greatest clients. And I have a confession to make, though, Granger. I mentioned earlier that I'm very poorly educated, and I had no idea really when I started the business that this is what it was going to be like. I thought I was going to be an entrepreneur, admittedly in the social space. But after 2 or 3 years, we had a sort of change in our structure slightly. My business partner left, and I had this opportunity to really think then, at that moment, to really think about what I wanted this thing to become. And I was quite wet behind the ears and wasn't feeling very confident, but I had a feeling that these were the values that if You know, I wanted those values in my personal life. They happen to be all of those things that I've mentioned happen to be biblical descriptions of what love is, and I wanted that very much in my personal life, and that was how I was living my personal life. But I felt that I wondered whether I had an opportunity to live out those values in my working life. And since doing that, that's when the business has become more successful, more cohesive, better relationships with clients, better relationships with staff. You know, there's reasonably significant growth that we've been through in the last few years and is continuing. And also, whenever we face challenges, when you think things like the pandemic, for example, and now cost of living crisis and so on. I mean, those are sort of big external factors which could overwhelm a small business. But it's those values which have held us together as a team, helped me to keep myself together.
Yeah.
And help keep the senior the leadership team together. I mean, it's not like nobody argues. You know, we have moments when we annoy each other or we annoy a client or whatever. But I think it's those values which keep everything going in the right direction.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fascinating, and I totally appreciate and understand how defining the values and living to those values helps a business, and I see that time and time again. And you know, you've brilliantly articulated there that when you live to your values in the business, then actually you find the right people, the business grows, you find the right clients because they're the fit to the values, not necessarily you just need them in terms of revenue and income. So yeah, and fantastic. Just interesting, you talked about the leadership team, and yeah, and you know, even the best values in the world, we you know, all have our own opinions of what we should do. So how as a business, and you know, as a business leader, the leadership team, how do you ensure that you're focusing on, you know, the right things to do next in the business in terms of what you need to do and achieve?
Well, honestly, Granger, those things make themselves known.
Okay.
So either in terms of opportunities, we're very fortunate in that the business grows through recommendation. So a client will say to somebody else who's in a similar boat, you should talk to the trust partnership. So opportunities are coming at us quite regularly. I think the thing and then you've got the short, so, and then the negative side, you might think, also there are day-to-day issues which are coming up. We've got a little structure within the business where there are different levels of management with people looking after each other and, you know, doing like regular appraisals, check-ins, how we're getting on, what are your training needs, would it help if you worked alongside this person? They're really experienced in that area. Making sure that people are doing the kind of work that really suits them, yeah, as much as, or that they're passionate about, as much as that's possible to do. And then atop the whole thing, there's a little leadership team of just 4 of us. And then, you know, we're meeting weekly to discuss those things which are bubbling up. And then there's a wider, slightly larger leadership team, which includes other people sort of further into the business that we're trying to draw into greater responsibility, as well as having an opportunity for me to spend more time with them. So I can keep the values and so on the agenda. And then And then I suppose there are the sort of internal opportunities, which I should mention, which are, the things that keep me awake at night. And I think it is me in that context. Worrying about the impact of technology. Do we have the right technology? Are there structural changes that we need to make to the business? And I've got this idea in my head that you never see the bus that kills you. I'm not sure it's true, but because people must see buses, but that hit them. But
Yeah.
But that's how I think about it in my head. I can worry about data protection and so on, and protecting my clients. As we're really fortunate to work very closely, hand in glove, with an amazing IT business, which we're also invested in, and called Gyra Solutions, and so we're constantly trying to stay on the sort of cutting edge of where we need to be in terms of protecting us and our clients with good technology. But then, there are economic changes which you can't predict. For example, the cost of living crisis. At some point we may get a change in government, and that government's view of the charity sector may be very different. For example, that various governments in the past have come up with the idea that endowed charities should be spending a percentage of their capital every year. So not just the revenue produced by that capital, but the capital itself. And that's something that, if that happened, we would need to be able to respond to that. To help them understand the rule, help our clients understand the rules and spend their capital in a suitable way, but also then to think, okay, so this set of clients can't go on in perpetuity unless they're refunded. So it's very likely that part of my client base will be eroded over, I don't know, a 25-year, 30-year 30-year period.
Yeah.
And so I need to, but anyway, so I'm thinking about all of these things, but the thing that keeps me awake at night is the thing that I haven't thought of yet.
Yes. Yes. No, fascinating thought in terms of the real long-term thinking that you're also doing as well. But the short-term impacts that may come around the corner. So just sort of a couple of sort of final questions now. In terms of what do you love most about your business? I can feel the passion through this conversation, and it's been absolutely fantastic. But what do you love most about it?
I love not just the impact that we're having as a business on the sector, on the sectors, the trust and foundation sector, and also now the Almshouse sector. I love the impact that we're able to have in those sectors, and I love the fact that trustees have now got a choice, and they don't have to. It doesn't have to be difficult for them. They can actually really enjoy what they're doing because they can work with an organisation like us to take away all of the pain.
Yeah.
But I love the impact that we have on people, both the people that work for us, the relief that residents of almshouses that we take over, the relief on their faces when we're taking responsibility for sometimes almshouses which haven't been very well managed for a very long time. So that's really exciting, and I love talking to grant recipients of my clients. I think the thing that because my clients' money is making an impact, and that's a really good thing. The thing that I love most is when we're able to, for example, in a very difficult situation, on behalf of clients, to be able to move quite large amounts of money around the world. So if you think about that earthquake in Turkey and Syria, you think about, the conflict in Ukraine, actually not putting money into Ukraine, but putting money into Germany to deal with refugees coming out of Ukraine when the war first started. But that I find really, really exciting. But the whole thing is so wonderful. Most business owners I know are working 60-hour weeks, and some of those 60 hours are miserable. And I think that a very low number in my 60 hours are miserable. I think the vast majority of those 60 hours are pleasurable in one way or another.
Wow, that's absolutely awesome. So normally we ask about, where would you be in 5 years' time, but you have a very long-term view of what the business is about and where it's going. So let's go forward 20 years from where we are. If we were to meet and have a coffee in 20 years' time, what do you think will have happened with the business, or what do you want to happen with the business over that time period?
So one of those long-term challenges is succession planning and thinking about recruiting the right people now that will build their career within the organization and then one day be managing it. And some of the more senior people who are there now, maybe, when I start, I'm 54 now, and so in 20 years' time, I'm going to be 74. I may be slowing down then. So there'll be people that can, if I go 4 days a week or something like that, then hand over some of my responsibilities to other people in the business. We're thinking now about how that succession plan might unfold, and I'm really excited about it. Honestly, I think the business, I'm definitely trying to create a business which will be multi-generational, and that doesn't. My family, my children may own the business or be part owners of the business I have some employee shareholders as well as a couple of external shareholders. So there's a really nice spread there. But I think, the business will certainly be there. I think it's hard to see how it wouldn't be significantly bigger, because just at the rate of growth and the fact that it's growing through referrals, which means that we constantly have to revisit the systems that we're building to continue to be fit for purpose. So those are really exciting challenges, but we are definitely thinking that long term.
Well, Benjamin, it's been a fantastic conversation today. Just the meeting somebody with such a long-term view in terms of what you wanted to do. You started back in 2005. You had that pivot point where you decided to really bring your values to life through the business, and seen the growth of that. Just the way that you've talked about how the values come to life in your business through the behaviors that you do, and the realism that we can't always live up to them. We make mistakes, but we use those values to actually really help us understand and doing it. I love the expression about helping people to settle into the business, so they and asking them during the interview, we're looking for you to work for us forever. I mean, what a fantastic statement. I don't think I've ever come across that in any interview I've ever done in my life or been part of in terms of doing that. And that real passion that I see through this whole conversation about you trying the business, helping the business through yourself to do the right thing, and really help your clients achieve their long-term goals, their aspirations that they need within a very fascinating and interesting marketplace of these trusts and almshouses. It's been a brilliant conversation. Thank you so much for that. We always finish off with a quick fire round. So a few questions just to finish off with. So see what comes to one to mind when I see these. So if you were to go back to younger you, what advice would you give yourself?
I think work hard earlier.
Okay, brilliant. Which books do you recommend, or what do you read?
I read quite a lot of sort of factual stuff. Very fond of a guy called Douglas Murray. I think he talks a lot of sense. And yeah, I'd say philosophy, a little bit about economics. You may have heard of a guy called Thomas Sowell. Yeah, it's that kind of stuff, really.
Brilliant, thank you. Which podcasts, if you do you listen to them, and which ones would you recommend?
I'm a great fan of The Spectator magazine, and they produce a number of podcasts on a variety of different subjects. I listen to a guy called Chris Williamson. He talks on a whole range of different subjects, including health and fitness and that sort of thing. And I think also lots of people loathe him, but Joe Rogan, I think, is amazing. Not particularly because he's Joe Rogan, but just that he attracts, because he has such a large audience, he attracts some really interesting guests. And if you pick the right guests, you get a 3-hour fascinating conversation, which some of the books that I've read, I've only ever heard of them through that process.
Oh, brilliant. Yes, that's often how I find interesting books as well. So on your mobile phone, are there any apps that make a difference for you?
Oh, God, I have to tell you, I don't know if you're using Xero accounting.
Yes.
But yeah, it's absolutely transformative that I can do my expenses on my phone so easily using Xero. I love and track my time, because obviously we track our time. So those are the two things that have made my life incredibly easy. Other than that, I don't really do social media. So WhatsApp. I have lots of clients abroad as well. And everybody who works internationally, really, especially in India and Africa, uses WhatsApp.
Yeah, right. Now, my favorite question of all, who's had the most influence on you as a business leader?
There are almost too many to mention. My father, definitely, who was not a business leader himself, he was an army officer. And my brothers, undoubtedly. And I think, though, there was a guy called David Campbell who was who started a charity called Farm Africa, who I work for. It was my first volunteer fundraising job, and then my first paid fundraising job. And he actually passed away recently. But he was a phenomenally hard taskmaster, but he taught me to write when I could hardly string a sentence together. And he taught me to write. And it's that power of being able to construct sentences appropriately to persuade and convince, that it was really a gift from him.
Brilliant. And finally, the final question is, how can people get hold of you?
You can find us very easily via our website, which is allofthews.thetrustpartnership.com.
Brilliant. Oh, Benjamin, thank you. Fantastic conversation today. Some real fascinating insights into building a long-term business. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Granger.
I hope you enjoyed that. discussion. And if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.